are divided. Like I said earlier, I thought Netanyahu knew he would be defeated in Lebanon. But then upon thinking about it more, I concluded that perhaps he thought he would be an easy victory, murdering or the martyrdom of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and senior commanders in that initial shock and awe wave. Maybe he thought that, these are just these Orientals and they would fall apart and they were just following a charismatic leader, a man who gave whose son was martyred for the cause, an excellent speaker, a highly educated person. He had all the characteristics that one would like to see in a leader. And with him gone, everything falls, because these people, they're just brown people and they're Orientals and they don't know how to organize. Maybe he saw it that way, and maybe that's what the West thought too. They didn't comprehend that this is a very sophisticated organization, as I said earlier, with very sophisticated young people in it, and very highly motivated and educated people who have brought this together, and they're going to be more motivated than before to defeat the enemy. So I don't know what the policy of the United States is, but let's go back to 2006 when it was said that when the Israeli regime launched their attack on Lebanon, the Western media was saying Hezbollah is being defeated and the Israelis are winning the war. That's what we're hearing the whole time in 2006. And then Condoleezza Rice went and said the birth pangs of a new Middle East. Well, 18 years later, we're hearing the same thing. What happened then? I think we're going to see the same thing happen again now. The only difference is that the defeat today will be much greater than in 2006. Because the West, the collective West, meaning the Western political order, the political establishment, which increasingly ordinary people in the West are recognizing to be authoritarian and dangerous, despotic and brutal, the collective West has put all its eggs in the basket of the Israeli regime, just like they've done in Ukraine. And we see what's happening in Ukraine today. A never-ending crisis. And I personally, I don't think that the crisis in Ukraine is going to go away either, because the collective West has invested too much in this. And even if, for example, Trump comes to power, how is he going to end the war? Russia is not going to set aside its demands after all these sacrifices for the sake of Trump. Russia says that I've made these sacrifices, I'm winning the war, these are my demands. If Trump accepts, he's humiliated. If he doesn't, then we have a continuation of the crisis. Here, the collective West has invested everything in this genocide, in this regime, much more than in 2006. So the defeat ultimately will be much greater for the West, especially, as I said earlier, because the West is seen as invested in the genocide. The West is behind the genocide. The West is a partner in this genocide. As I said earlier, just forget Gaza. Forget the ongoing massacres and the starvation that we've seen for over a year in Gaza. Right now in northern Gaza, they are starving northern Gaza. They are starving northern Gaza. Everyone knows this. Everyone knows this. And they're pounding northern Gaza as they starve them. Everyone knows this. If the BBC and CNN suddenly went and focused on northern Gaza, do you think that the Israelis would be able to continue this for 3 days? The US government would have to step in. Trump would have to step in. The whole political establishment would have to step in. But they don't do that because they're all in this together. This notion of freedom and democracy and checks and balances and the fourth estate and the fifth estate and the 10th estate, it's all nonsense. It's all a joke. So the West has destroyed itself. The West has diminished itself. And therefore, I think that either they foolishly think, like in 2006, that they're going to win because Hezbollah, or they know that they are not going to win, but they still do it anyway. Or there's some who think it's mixed. Some think, Ukraine began earlier. From day I was in Vienna during the nuclear negotiations. When the war started, a very famous journalist was based there, and he was focusing on the nuclear talks. I won't name him. If I name even his media outlet, it'll be clear who it is. He specialized on the nuclear program. That's what we had long discussions about the war. And I said that Russia will win. And he was certain that Russia will lose. And the reason why I was arguing with him that, you need a deal with Iran. You're going to have an energy crisis. This is going to be a long and painful war for the West. But he didn't accept it. A year later, actually, he sent me a message and saying, I was thinking about what you were saying in Vienna, but recently. So his views did evolve apparently. But the point is that we knew this. It wasn't just me, it was many of us. We knew that they were not going to be able to turn the ruble into rubble. They couldn't overthrow Iran. They couldn't overthrow Syria. They couldn't overthrow Venezuela. How are they going to overthrow Russia?
Hi, this is Jake from Optery. Optery is a free consumer privacy tool that helps you remove your home address, phone number, and other private info from the web. In this video, we're going to cover signing up for Optery, our privacy pledge, your free scan, aka exposure report, and free versus paid plans. Let's jump in. First is signing up. Signing up for Optery is free. With a free Optery...
But I think that many of these people thought they could because they live in that bubble in Washington or in London or in Paris or in Berlin. And many others probably knew better. But still, when the political establishment says, this is where we go, that's where you get your funding. That's how you get a good life. That's how you keep your job. You just remain quiet and do what it is you have to do. So I don't know. I don't know whether American policy in Lebanon is based on the fact that they really think the Israeli regime will be victorious, and they send an Israeli citizen to negotiate on behalf of the US government? Or is it that they know that things are not going well, but like in Ukraine, that's the only path that they recognize? Or there's an argument and debate going on inside the United States. But I think ultimately they're going to have to acknowledge defeat, because there will be an end to this war at some point. It may not be soon, but it will end. And if the Israeli regime does not achieve victory, it has lost. If the Israeli regime does not achieve victory, it is lost. And if it loses, that is the end of Israel. Not overnight, not within a month or two, but that's the end of Israel. Because the aura, everything about Israel, all that the mythology of Israel will collapse. So Israel has to win, and I see no path to victory.
When we look at the conflict in Ukraine, as you've mentioned, recently there were some discussions, if you remember, that Stormer went to the United States, had a meeting with Biden about sending these long-range missiles to Israel, to Ukraine to fight Russia. And in those days, it seems that Pentagon had the upper hand in the United States to manage the situation, not to let these missiles getting into Ukraine because of the fear they had to escalations. Right now, with these leaked documents in the Middle East, talking about the conflict between Iran and Israel, do you think the same type of mindset is just managing the situation? Because when considering all of this, and recently Donald Trump had an interview on a podcast, an Iranian American podcast called Patrick Bet David, and Donald Trump,
the blind leading the blind.
And Donald Trump was talking about that. I want Iran to be prosperous. I don't want any sort of war with Iran. But the only thing would be the nuclear energy program of Iran. He was the one that withdrew from the agreement between Iran and the United States. How do you think that what's going on right now with Israel in the Middle East, that they know that Israel is losing? That's why Trump is changing his tone against Iran. Is he going to change the US foreign policy if he wins toward Iran, or it's all delusional? And we know at the end of the day, the Israeli lobby is much more powerful.
There's no easy answer for this, because Trump is a very impulsive person. He says very different things at different times. He has also been the reason why Iran has developed its nuclear program so extensively, because he tore up the nuclear deal. Of course, Obama didn't abide by the commitments that the US made after signing the deal, but Trump tore it up, and Iran did the right thing and began to expand its nuclear program again, and very rapidly. And now Iran is a threshold state. Its program is peaceful, but as the former foreign minister, Dr. Kamal Kharrazi, said twice, and he's an advisor to the leader, that if there's a nuclear threat to Iran, Iran's nuclear posture will change. He said that, he never withdrew that statement. It was never criticize. He never retracted. So obviously that means that he spoke on authority. So Trump himself pushed Iran towards a more expanded nuclear program, although a peaceful program. And Iran could create a nuclear weapon very easily. If Iran wanted a nuclear weapon, Iran could have made a nuclear weapon 15 years ago. But Iran has decided not to do so. Why? Because nuclear weapons are not good for the stability of the region. If Iran develops a nuclear weapon, then Saudi Arabia would want one, then Turkey would want one, then Egypt would want one, then Central Asian countries would, and then, who knows if some coup d'etat happens somewhere and then some madman comes to power in some country, what will happen in our region? So a nuclear weapon is not a good thing in general. But the Iranians are a threshold state, and by being a threshold state, they're making this statement that, look, don't threaten us. And we keep in mind that Iran's peaceful nuclear program is well protected. All of Iran's key assets are well protected because Iran has been preparing itself not for an Israeli strike. It's been